Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It was past midnight when the door finally creaked open. I sat in the living room, lights low, waiting. She walked in, not quietly, not guilty, but with that smirk she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. Lauren looked at me and said, "Be grateful I even came home." Something inside me shifted in that instant. Not rage, not heartbreak, just clarity. I stood up slowly, met her eyes, and replied, "Thanks, but why? You don't live here anymore." The smirk vanished. She blinked, confused, as if she hadn't heard me right. For years, I had been the man who let things slide, the one who swallowed the late nights, the excuses, the half-hearted affection. I had been steady, dependable, predictable. But in that moment, she realized that man was gone. She tried to laugh it off, saying I was being dramatic. She dropped her purse on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and waited for me to soften. But I didn't. I walked to the closet, pulled out an empty box, and began collecting the things she had scattered around the house. Her shoes by the door, her jackets draped over chairs, her makeup on the sink. Each item dropped into the box was a reminder that she had mistaken my silence for weakness. Lauren's voice rose. She said I was overreacting, that couples have rough patches, that I should be thankful she chose to come home at all. I didn't answer. I taped the box shut, carried it to the garage, and set it by the door. She followed me, still trying to spin control back in her direction. She said I was making a mistake, that I wouldn't last a week without her. I kept my back to her, opened my phone, and with a few swipes removed her access to the accounts she had drained for years. The look on her face when her card declined in real time was the first crack in her armor. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to explain. I had already made the decision she thought I'd never make. She had crossed the line one too many times, and the quiet resolve in my voice told her I wasn't bluffing. By the time the sun came up, her things were in the garage, her name was off the accounts, and the locks were scheduled to be changed. She wasn't my partner anymore. She was just another guest who had overstayed her welcome. And the cruel truth she hadn't realized yet was this. Her little smirk, that weapon she thought could always disarm me, had been the very thing that ended her place in my life. Lauren didn't leave right away. She hovered in the kitchen like she still had a claim to the space, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She said I was bluffing, that I wouldn't dare end things over a late night. But I wasn't ending anything over one night. I was ending it because this was the last straw in a long line of contempt she had shown me. She tried another tactic. She softened her tone, asked me to sit down, said she just wanted to explain. I stayed standing, steady, silent, letting her words fall flat. She had mistaken my patience for weakness too many times. Now she was realizing that silence could be sharper than any argument. I picked up my phone, canceled the joint streaming accounts she lived on, and switched the utilities into my name only. She watched, her expression tightening, as piece by piece the world she thought she owned slipped away. She asked me if I was really doing this. I told her it was already done. That night, she paced the living room, throwing out half-hearted apologies and then snapping back with accusations when I didn't respond. She said I was cold, ungrateful, impossible to please. But underneath her shifting tone, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being cut off, fear of realizing she wasn't as independent as she liked to believe. By morning, she packed a small bag and stormed out, slamming the door like it was supposed to rattle me. Instead, the silence that followed felt like clarity. I went upstairs, opened the closet, and kept filling boxes. Every picture, every trace of her clutter, every reminder of what we once had was sealed away. Not out of spite, but out of finality. That day, I drove her things to a storage unit. I paid for the first month, left the key under her name, and walked out. No drama, no confrontation, just action. When she texted later asking where her stuff was, I sent the address and nothing more. Her reply came hours later, a string of messages that swung between anger and desperation. She said I was heartless, that she didn't deserve this, that I'd regret it. But regret was the one thing I didn't feel. I had carried this marriage on my back for years. Now I was finally setting it down. And as I sat in the quiet of my own house that night, for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. She thought her absence would punish me. What she didn't realize was that her absence was the one thing I needed most. The first few days without her were quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in years. No late-night doors slamming, no raised voices filling the halls, no half-hearted apologies tossed like scraps. Just silence, steady and clean. It was the kind of silence that doesn't hurt, it heals. But Lauren couldn't stay away for long. On the third night, she came back. Not with bags this time, not with confidence. She stood on the porch, knocking softly, almost timidly. I opened the door just enough to see her face, then waited. She said she wanted to talk, that maybe she had been out of line, that she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. I didn't invite her in. I told her the house wasn't hers anymore. Her mouth opened like she was going to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time, she didn't have a rehearsed line to throw at me. She left, and an hour later my phone buzzed with messages. She said she missed me. She said she didn't realize how much I did for her until it was gone. She said she was scared. I read them all in silence, then set my phone down and let the screen go dark. At work, people noticed the change in me. I carried myself differently. Lighter. Sharper. I wasn't dragging the weight of her disdain anymore, and it showed. I stayed later, focused harder, and even started picking up projects I had avoided when home felt like a battlefield. The more I rebuilt myself, the further away she seemed. But she wasn't done. A week later, I found her car parked down the street, engine off, lights dim. She was watching the house. When I stepped outside, she rolled down the window and asked if she could just come in for a while, just to feel like things were normal again. I shook my head. I told her there was no normal left. Her eyes glistened, but I didn't waver. I turned back inside, locked the door, and let her sit in the dark with her choices. She had smirked at me, told me to be grateful she even came home. And now, she was the one begging for the home she had taken for granted. The balance had shifted completely. She was outside, looking in, and I was finally where I should have been all along, on the inside, in control, untouchable. Lauren's presence lingered like a shadow I refused to acknowledge. Every couple of days, she would try again, first with texts, then with calls, then by showing up unannounced. Each attempt chipped away at the image she had built of herself, the untouchable woman who could come and go as she pleased. Now she was the one left outside, knocking on a door that no longer opened for her. I didn't respond. Not with anger, not with explanations. Just silence. And silence worked faster than any fight could. It forced her to face herself, to sit with the choices she had made. She had spent years smirking, dismissing me, treating my presence like background noise. Now, stripped of my attention, she was unraveling. Her desperation didn't just reach me, it reached others too. I began hearing from friends who said she was calling them, spinning stories, claiming I had turned cold without reason. But lies carry cracks, and her stories didn't hold together. She told one person she had left by choice, another that I had thrown her out, and another that we were still working things out. People compared notes, and her credibility crumbled. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. I joined a local gym, started running again, and reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. The contrast was obvious. While she spiraled, I was rising. And people noticed. Some even told me outright that they respected how calm I was, how I hadn't resorted to shouting matches or public drama. They said I looked freer, sharper. And the truth was, I was. Lauren tried one last card. She left a letter on my doorstep, handwritten, pages long. She wrote about regret, about how she hadn't realized how much I carried, how she missed the stability I gave her. She said she was ready to change. I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it back outside. The wind carried it away by morning. For me, that letter wasn't an opening. It was closure. It showed me that she finally understood the cost of her arrogance, the price of every smirk and dismissal. But understanding didn't erase the damage. It didn't undo the years. And it didn't change the fact that the man she thought she controlled was gone. The silence I gave her wasn't punishment. It was the end. And deep down, I think she knew it. She had played her final hand, and all she was left holding was emptiness. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into a new life I didn't know I had been missing. The air in the house was lighter, the nights calmer, the mornings sharper. Without her constant chaos, I found myself reclaiming pieces of who I used to be. I read more, worked harder, and even started cooking again, something she once mocked as a waste of time. But Lauren couldn't accept being erased. She started showing up in places she knew I'd be, at the grocery store, outside the gym, once even at my office parking lot. Each time, she carried a different mask. Sometimes she was apologetic, other times furious, and once she even pretended like nothing had happened at all, as if she still belonged in my world. I never gave her what she wanted. No outbursts, no long explanations, no cracks she could slip through. My silence became the wall she couldn't climb. And every time she ran into it, I could see her unraveling a little more. Word about her reached me without me asking. Friends said she was restless, bouncing between places, never staying long. She had drained her accounts and was leaning on people who quickly grew tired of her constant drama. The sympathy she expected wasn't coming, and the control she once had over others was slipping just like it had with me. One evening, a mutual friend told me something that sealed it all. Lauren had admitted to her that she missed the version of me who once bent over backwards to keep her happy. She said she thought if she pushed me far enough, I'd always snap back into that role. Hearing that confirmed everything I already knew. She hadn't wanted love. She had wanted control. That night, I sat on the porch, the same porch where she had once smirked at me and told me to be grateful she even came home. The memory didn't sting anymore. It felt distant, almost foreign. I realized I wasn't living in reaction to her anymore. I wasn't waiting for her next move, her next excuse, her next smirk. The power had shifted completely. She was outside, flailing, chasing shadows of a man who no longer existed. And I was inside, steady, detached, moving forward without her. For years, she thought I needed her presence. What she never understood was that it was her absence that finally gave me back my life. The more time passed, the clearer the contrast became between her downfall and my rise. I wasn't just surviving without her. I was thriving. I looked sharper, felt stronger, and carried myself with a calmness that even strangers noticed. At work, colleagues started inviting me to leadership discussions, something that had never happened before. In my personal life, I found myself reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to in years, and they all said the same thing. I seemed lighter, more present. Meanwhile, Lauren's attempts to reach me grew darker. She left voicemails late at night, her voice slurring, begging me to talk to her. Sometimes she would lash out, accusing me of heartlessness, of betrayal, of abandoning her. Other times she sounded almost childlike, asking if I remembered certain moments from our past, as if nostalgia could drag me back into her orbit. But the truth was, those memories didn't hold me anymore. They felt like someone else's life. I didn't reply. Not once. My silence was final, and she could feel it. Friends told me she was burning bridges faster than ever, lashing out at the very people she had once used as her safety net. Even her family started to pull away, tired of the endless excuses and contradictions. One evening, I spotted her outside the old coffee shop we used to frequent. She looked different, smaller, worn out, almost invisible compared to the woman who once strutted in with a smirk that could silence a room. Our eyes met for a moment, and she gave a faint smile, the kind that begged for recognition. I kept walking. No anger, no words, just distance. And that hurt her more than anything else I could have done. That night, she sent me one final message. She said she realized I wasn't the same man she had once controlled, that I was colder now, unreachable. She said she hated that indifference more than she had ever hated my anger. Reading that, I understood something important. She was finally seeing me clearly. She wasn't facing the man she once mocked. She was facing the man who had left her behind. And for me, that was the true ending. Not her absence, not the silence, not the empty house. The ending came the moment I realized she no longer had the power to move me at all. She had lost me, not with one mistake, but with years of taking for granted a man who had finally learned to walk away. By the time the second month rolled around, the storm had completely shifted. Lauren wasn't chasing me anymore. She was chasing anyone who would listen. I heard through mutual friends that she was telling people I had changed, that I had become cold and heartless overnight. But the more she talked, the more people began to see through her. They remembered her smirks, the late arrivals, the careless way she flaunted her freedom. They remembered how I carried everything in silence while she played games. Her words no longer worked. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth had already done it for me. While she scrambled to rewrite the story, my actions spoke louder. I kept my head down, built my routine, and stayed steady. Every step I took forward was another reminder that she had no hold on me anymore. Then her sister called me. She didn't ask me to forgive Lauren. She didn't even try to excuse her behavior. She just said, "I understand now. I see what you went through." That single sentence told me everything. Lauren's own family had stopped believing her. The foundation she once relied on was gone. I thought that would be the end, but Lauren made one last attempt. Late one evening, she showed up at the house again. This time there was no smirk, no sharp words. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow, her voice shaking. She asked if I could just let her inside for 5 minutes, to sit down, to talk like we used to. I looked at her, but I didn't move. I told her the truth. There was nothing inside this house for her anymore. Her lips trembled, like she wanted to fight, but she couldn't. She turned and walked away, slower than I'd ever seen her move. That was the last time I saw her on my doorstep. After she left, I sat in the quiet again, the same quiet she once thought would destroy me. But it hadn't destroyed me, it had rebuilt me. The silence was no longer hers. It was mine. She thought walking away late at night with a smirk had given her power. What she never understood was that her smirk was the spark that lit my exit. And now, she was the one locked out of the life she had taken for granted. Life without her didn't just become normal, it became better. I no longer walked into a house filled with tension, no longer braced myself for sarcasm dressed up as affection. The air was lighter, the rooms felt bigger, and for the first time in years, I could hear myself think. It amazed me how quickly peace returned once she was gone. Lauren, on the other hand, was collapsing. I didn't follow her life closely, but the stories reached me anyway. She had moved into a small apartment across town, already behind on rent, already leaning on friends who were running out of patience. She tried to post pictures online, pretending everything was perfect, but even through filters and captions, the truth bled through. She looked thinner, stressed, and smaller than the woman she once pretended to be. One afternoon, I received an email from her. Not a text, not a call, an email. She wrote that she missed me, that she regretted everything, that she finally understood what she had thrown away. It was long, detailed, almost desperate. She said she couldn't stop thinking about the way I had looked at her the night I told her she didn't live here anymore. She admitted it scared her more than anything, that I hadn't yelled, hadn't begged, hadn't argued. I had just ended it. I didn't respond. I closed the email, archived it, and went back to my day. For me, her words carried no weight anymore. They were just echoes of someone who had smirked one too many times, someone who thought my silence meant weakness. But now, silence was my power. At work, I earned a promotion I had once been passed over for. My colleagues said I seemed sharper, more decisive. Outside of work, I built new routines that had nothing to do with her, weekend hikes, dinners with friends, even picking up hobbies I had forgotten I loved. Every step forward widened the gap between the man she thought she controlled and the man I had become. And as for Lauren, her absence stopped being noticeable. She faded from conversations, from gatherings, from relevance. People who once entertained her stories no longer mentioned her at all. She had gone from the center of attention to a ghost lingering in the background. That was the difference between us now. She was stuck looking back, desperate to return to a life she ruined. And I was already too far ahead, living a life she could never touch again. The last time I saw her, it wasn't planned. I was leaving a restaurant downtown when she walked in with a couple of people I didn't recognize. For a split second, our eyes met. There was no smirk this time, no arrogance, no trace of the woman who once strutted into my home hours late and told me to be grateful she even came back. What I saw instead was hesitation, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I didn't stop. I didn't nod. I walked past her the same way I'd walk past a stranger. And that was what she had become, someone I used to know, someone who no longer existed in my world. Later that night, my phone lit up with a message. She said she had seen me, that I looked different, stronger, unreachable. She wrote that it terrified her more than anything, that I didn't even acknowledge her. She said she missed my anger, my arguments, my attention, because even those things proved I still cared. But indifference? That was something she couldn't fight. I read the words once and deleted them. I didn't need to respond. The silence was louder than any reply could ever be. In the weeks that followed, her name stopped reaching me altogether. Friends no longer mentioned her, family no longer asked. It was as if she had faded completely, swallowed up by the life she had chosen. And I realized that was the true end. Not the night I carried her suitcase to the door, Not the day I shut off her access to everything. Not even the moment I told her she didn't live here anymore. The real end came when she disappeared from my thoughts, when her presence no longer echoed in the walls of my life. By then, I wasn't just free of her. I was stronger, sharper, more alive than I had been in years. I wasn't defined by her absence, but by what I had built in its place. And if there was one truth that stood above all else, it was this. She thought she could control me with smirks, with games, with contempt. But in the end, all of that only pushed me into becoming the man she could never reach again. The story ended not with shouting, not with closure spoken out loud, but with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't demand answers because it already holds them. One morning, I realized it had been weeks since I last thought of her. Not her smirk, not her absence, not even her downfall. She was no longer a part of the rhythm of my life. The house that once carried her shadow was mine again. The kitchen no longer felt like a battlefield. The bedroom no longer felt like a Cold War zone. Every corner of the place reflected only me, my choices, my peace. I had rebuilt it, piece by piece, into something she could never take from me again. I found myself laughing more with friends, working harder with focus I hadn't felt in years, and living in ways I never thought I'd return to. I had become someone different, not just free, but untouchable. I didn't need to explain myself, not to her, not to anyone. My actions had spoken. My silence had carved the line she could never cross. She had once believed she could walk through the door whenever she pleased, smirk on her face, knowing I'd be waiting. But that smirk, the one she thought gave her power, had been her undoing. The night she told me to be grateful she came home, she handed me the clarity I needed. And my reply, simple, steady, final, was the beginning of the end. Thanks, I had told her. But why? You don't live here anymore. Those words had cut deeper than anger ever could. They didn't just close the door on her presence. They closed the chapter of my life where I allowed myself to be treated as optional. Now, the silence she once feared belongs to me. It isn't loneliness. It isn't emptiness. It's strength. It's freedom. It's the clean break she thought I'd never have the courage to make. She wanted control. She ended up with nothing. I wanted peace. I ended up with everything. And that is the difference between us now. She looks back at the life she lost, while I move forward in the life I've built. She asked me to be grateful. And I am grateful she's gone, grateful she freed me, grateful I will never make the mistake of letting someone like her into my world again. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.